And suicide is the most common type of unnatural death in prisons, with the majority occurring in Gauteng. That's according to a report that has been released by the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. It shows that overcrowding remains a serious problem in South African prisons. There's also a lack of care for prisoners who suffer from mental illnesses. For more on this, I'm joined by the Inspecting Judge of Correctional Services, former Constitutional Court Judge Johan van der Westhuizen. We will talk to him in just a moment, but I want to show you what the picture looks like from that report of the Judicial Inspectorate. So let's start with how the population figures stack up in the prisons. We have a total of 243 prisons, and for various reasons, the Inspectorate was able to only inspect 81 in the past financial year, and the total prison population over 164,000, whereas the bed space that's available is actually far less than that. It already talks to issues of overcrowding, and the number that jumps out at me here, in as far as these numbers is concerned, the awaiting trial number of prisoners who are awaiting trial, that is at 46,259. That's a massive number of people who have not been sentenced but are in jail attending their court cases. And this figure is also important. 1,200 prisoners who are said to have been diagnosed with mental illness, and you'll find out why this is of concern to the Judicial Inspectorate of Prisons. Now, let's have a look at overcrowding. These are the figures, a sample of the figures. Overcrowding is a general trend in as far as the prisons are concerned, but these are just the samples of the various prisons where they stand. Initially, I thought the situation was bad at Johannesburg Maximum A, that's known as Sun City, and Jose Mampuru at 65% and 67% overcrowding. But have a look at Mdantsane, which was meant to carry 582 prisoners, but actually currently, at least at the date of the inspection, was at 1,456. That's 150% in as far as overcrowding is concerned. So what is the effect of all of these shortages and sort of weaknesses in the system? You are seeing a lot of violence that is taking place. Have a look at those numbers. Look at the assaults that were taking place by an official on an inmate. 231 recorded for 2017-2018 as opposed to 208 in 2015-16. And sexual assault is also a number there that is not insignificant. And then finally, I want to show you the number of unnatural deaths that were recorded. It's 82. So if you take a 5-year look, we've gone from just about 46 unnatural deaths that were recorded in our prisons in 2013, and we are at 82. And these are deaths that occur due to various reasons, including homicide and also suicide, which is the leading cause. So let's speak to the judge here, Judge Johan van der Westhuizen. Thank you so much for coming through, sir, and talking to me. So your report is out now, and it points to a dire situation, particularly the overcrowding situation. How bad is that situation?
Yeah, the overcrowding is quite bad. Let me be fair first, before we become really alarmist. Our prisons are certainly not those in Norway or the Netherlands, but we are also very far from the situation that we sometimes see on television programs in Latin America or some other African countries where people just disappear into a large black hole until somebody is bribed to get them out. Our Correctional Services Department, they have very good records of everything, for a start. But back to the overcrowding. Yes, it is bad. At some point a few years ago, I saw in Poulsmoor, in a cell for trial awaiting inmates, I saw more than 90 people in a cell built for 20. Since then, the Poulsmoor situation has improved because there was a court judgment forcing them. But many of those people have simply been moved on to other centres. And those centres then become more overcrowded, with the additional disadvantage that people are far away from their homes and their families, etc. And to some extent, the overcrowding is at the bottom of most of the problems in our correctional services.
In fact, that's the point I want you to talk to, because my sense was exactly that where you have a situation where it's so overcrowded, it puts a strain on the resources that are available to do what our prison system is meant to do, which is really correction and rehabilitation of offenders. To what extent then is the overcrowding directly linked to, in your view, to some of the challenges that we see, the number of unnatural deaths, the violence that we see in the prison?
It is definitely linked. For example, the gang situation, gangs in prisons functioning sometimes in collaboration with gangs outside prisons, all of those things become much more difficult to manage when the place is overcrowded. Also, the Correctional Services Department often have staff shortages. And if you move to the issue of mental illness, for example, sometimes that is, by the way, not only a question of the overcrowding of prisons, it is also the overcrowding of mental hospitals. If you want to, we can talk about that.
In fact, absolutely. Let's go there. 1,200, the number of inmates that you identified as having been diagnosed with one form of mental illness or another. They are in prison, and ideally they shouldn't be.
Yeah, there are two categories of these people. The one category should indeed not be there. These are people who are called state patients. In other words, they are certified to be not, and declared by a court to be not even able to understand their own trial. In other words, they commit horrendous things. Some of them, I've seen a number of women killing their own babies, etc. Then they are found not to be capable of understanding their trial. So they are state patients, and that is what they should be. They should be patients in mental institutions. But because of a shortage of beds and apparently a long waiting list, they are being kept in prisons, some of them for many, many years. Then the other half of this problem are people who are convicted and sent to prison, but upon their admission, the prison staff, the nurses and doctors, etc., diagnose them with some kind of mental illness, which could be from very serious schizophrenia to unruly behavior. So they have to be separated from people who are not mentally ill. But what happens in some places, I've recently seen a cell where exactly half of the inmates in a communal cell are state patients and the other half are mentally ill, and they're all together. And in that very cell, a murder occurred in May or June this year.
Is there political will to address these matters? I mean, I know, for instance, there's a point you make about your own budgetary constraints, your own resource constraints as the Inspectorate. Is there political will to ensure that this is addressed?
I suppose you have to ask the politicians that. Let me just say that as far as there's been no political interference during my time as inspecting judge. No minister or deputy minister has told us to cover up or lie low or something. In fact, we've been encouraged to have a higher public profile and so on. When it comes to resources, we have a problem. The Act, the Correctional Services Act, says we are an independent office under the control of the inspecting judge. But administratively and budget-wise, we belong with the Department of Correctional Services. And there we have huge frustrations, sometimes with enough money to buy vehicles to visit these 243
Does
centers.
that explain why you were only able to visit 81 out of the 243?
Yeah, not the vehicles, but our capacity. We are working on a new model where we will be able to inspect a lot more. Let me just make something clear also. When we say an inspection, we mean a proper inspection by our inspectors, filling in forms over a period of 2 days, checking kitchens and hospitals and everything. That we, at this stage, can do only once in 3 years with every specific center. However, we have people from the community working with us on a contractual basis called Independent Correctional Services Visitors. And in many of these places, they are there almost on a daily basis. But they are not experts, they are community. They are simply our eyes and ears. They let us know if there's something which seems untoward. But facilities, budget, that is definitely a huge constraint. There is litigation pending about our independence. And we hope to achieve a situation where, budget-wise, administratively, we will be more independent.
Talk to me quickly, Justice, before I let you go, on about the issue of unnatural deaths. People are sent to prison, right? Their freedom and their human rights, which continue to be guaranteed in our Constitution, are somewhat curtailed, as part of the justice system that we have. But they don't go to prison to die.
Exactly.
What are some of the leading causes of this?
Yeah, your starting point is very good here. Of course, when you are sentenced to a prison sentence, you lose some of your rights, like your right to move around freely. Sure. That's the most important point. But you can never lose your right to dignity. And that would relate to your right to get proper food and medical attention, etc. You are punished. The fact that you lose your freedom, that's your punishment. There is no additional punishment that you're supposed to be assaulted. The assaults, the violence happens inmate on inmate, inmate on wardens, and officials then on inmates. All of these occur. What is it that you asked about?
I was asking that what are some of the reasons?
Yeah.
And how do we tackle?
Well, the reasons would be gang warfare. The reasons would be that inmates attack an official at a particular point as part of some ritual. The officials initially run away, then they call in the reinforcements who come in with dogs and heavy equipment, etc. But the most disturbing thing in this regard, which I have to say, is that in terms of the Correctional Services Act, there is a mandatory reporting system. The Department of Correctional Services has to report to us, to JICS, every unnatural death and also every instance where the use of force occurred. In other words, we don't have to go and inspect. They have to report. This used to happen by way of a computer system, which has collapsed and is now not been functioning for the last 2-3 years. We agreed with Correctional Services that they should report manually, but this is virtually not happening at all, in spite of several discussions. The new commissioner, national commissioner, sent out some instruction earlier this year, but it is still not happening. So we pick up these deaths and other instances of violence and force through the ICCVs, perhaps through inspections. Sometimes we read about it in the newspaper.
That is concerning.
That is very concerning that the mandatory reporting is not taking place.
Justice Johan van der Westhuizen, thank you so much for coming through. We are out of time. I would have loved to continue this conversation with you. He is, of course, the judge that is at the head of the Judicial Inspectorate of Correctional Services. And towards the end there, real questions for Justice Minister Michael Masuta and the Correctional Services Commissioner Arthur Fraser to answer for us. All right, coming up, the latest from the business front with Mateo Paripe. This is ENCA Now.